Welcome, everybody. We are at this amazing webinar today where we're going to hear about IBM's success story in, I'm just going to say, completely transforming their forecasting processes. So today we have, guys, this is not IBM, like just salespeople telling you their story. This is people that lived it, eat, ate it, bred it. Like this is their baby. So I'm super excited to share this with you. We're gonna go ahead and let people start joining. I see a lot of people coming in. Yeah. So guys, today some of you are in our CPAs in America, and if so, you need CPE credits. That's continuing education credits for people that are accountants. And that being said, we are going to offer that to you today. But here's the trick. We're going to have you answer 4 polling questions. Well, we're going to give you 4 polling questions. You must answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions in order to qualify for CPE credits so we know you were here. And then at the end, we are going to ask you to complete a survey that, again, validates that you were here. And our page on our team will send you your CPE certification for this 1 hour of credit. So that's how that works. If you are here to learn about how IBM Finance achieved significant productivity gains implementing their own planning tool, Planning Analytics, then you are in the right place. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We did go through the CPE credits once again for those that just popped in late. The CPE credits, you're going to have to answer 3 out of the 4 polling questions. And actually, let's get this started right now. Let's ask your first polling question I'm going to launch, and that is, what tools do you currently use as your primary budgeting and planning solution? Is it Anaplan, Excel, Host Analytics, IBM Planning Analytics, OneStream, Oracle, Profix, SAP, Vena, Workday? Gosh, there's a lot of planning tools, aren't there, out there? Or other. Please go ahead and enter in your answer to that. Again, we not surprisingly, there are a lot of planning analytics customers on here. Needless to say, this was a little bit of a loaded question when you're here to hear IBM's story. But please make sure you go ahead and answer those questions if you want CPE credits, and we'll keep that open for just a moment. And David, if you can move to the next slide, please. And we'll keep that poll open just a little longer as we do introductions. Well, for those of you that don't know me, I am Heather Cole, founder of Lodestar Solutions, reseller and implementer of planning analytics here in the United States. I'm also an executive coach, and I'm super excited to bring our team of IBMers today. We have Ryan and David, and then we have a special host. Many of you might have met Gary Lafferty at IBM Tech Exchange. So, guys, I'm going to start. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I'm Ryan Langenbrunner. I'm based out of not so sunny Rochester, Minnesota. I'm the leader for planning solutions in the IBM Chief Data Office. Our team builds designs and deploys our internal planning solutions that we use within the company. I actually unironically started my career in finance. And so as we talk about this journey, I spent my early years buried in spreadsheets and in chasing data and long nights with the churn. So as we walk through this journey, if you want to know anything about my career, just take a look. It goes lockstep with that largely until I moved into the Chief Data Office. So excited to be here. I'll pass it on to David.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Traeger. I'm based in, right now I'm in San Jose, California, live in Palo Alto. Really nice to be with you all. I had a pleasure to meet Heather last year, and she's just a wonderful person to collaborate with. So excited to join this session. I've spent the past decade really transforming IBM after spending, previous 10 years in management consulting, working with IBM's clients, and really transforming our finance and operations with the use of data and AI. And I, like Ryan, really suffered from the pain of many of our challenges when it came to financial data, and have the late nights with bleary eyes and working at a small cramped kitchen table in New York City with with 2 little kids sleeping in the room, now trying to wake them up. Definitely lived the pain of this journey and really happy to share our story today.
Thank you, David.
Excellent.
My name is Gary Lafferty. Some of you might, as Heather said, might have met me at the Tech Exchange last year. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the host of the Growth Focus for Tech podcast, where I interview tech leaders from all across the globe on what it takes to run and be in tech today, and also the presentation coach for IBM Tech Exchange. So if you're going to be at Tech Exchange, and you're presenting, more than likely you want to come across me, or if not, make sure you come and say hello. But I'm really looking forward to today, because today I'm going to be the moderator for this webinar. And the reason why I'm excited about this, not just for me, but for you guys as well, is that all too often we can read a case study and we can understand, or kind of understand, how somebody and how a group managed to completely transform. But the way we're going to do it today is like a living, breathing case study. And so I'm going to do my very best to get the best out of David and Ryan today. So make sure that you get the very best out of today as well.
Excellent, guys. Right before we keep moving on, I'm going to end the poll. So last chance to get your poll question if you need CPE credits, because it is closing now. And unsurprisingly, most of the people here were planning analytic customers. So we will go ahead and move on. David?
There we go. So I just want to start with a little bit of the background of IBM's business and our business transformation over the past 7 years, because this is helpful context to understand how we had to really transform from finance and operations to support this business model transformation. So IBM used to be really a IT hardware company primarily, and actually less than half of our revenue was software centric. If I go back to 2018, today, if you look at 2024's revenue, greater than 80% of our revenue is software centric. Nearly 50% of our revenue comes from the sale of software products. So we've dramatically changed our business model as a company, moving from hardware and IT services, core IT services, to now software and innovative delivery with our clients. And this is underpinning this massive transformation has been a really aggressive mergers and acquisitions approach. And we've done, at the time, our acquisition of Red Hat was the largest acquisition in enterprise software history. Since then, we've been very aggressive. We've acquired over 50 companies, and most recently closing the HashiCorp acquisition for over $6 billion in this February. We've also divested. We've spun out part of our businesses that aren't related to software-centric growth or didn't fit our focus on hybrid cloud and AI. And so this business model transformation, it really meant that we had to fundamentally transform the way we worked inside finance and operations to support these new high-growth business sectors.
So David, before we move on from that one, if we could stay on this one, setting the stage for today. IBM, obviously, it's been on a remarkable journey to reimagine finance. What was the core goal that kicked all of this off for you guys?
It's a great question, Gary. And if I could net it down to one word, it was productivity. And actually, our CEO, for 2 years in a row, his word of the year was productivity. And we had to just become much more productive, much faster as a company to compete with these business model shifts, with the focus on hybrid cloud and AI. Within finance, what it meant was really accelerating decision velocity and doing, frankly, more with less. So we had to have fewer people, smaller teams, but be able to deliver insights faster to the business and help guide IBM's transformation. Ryan, I don't know if you want to add anything as well.
No, I think that's dead on. I'd throw in speed and agility, and that's really where the turning inward in tech focus came from, right? The long lead times and the stretched out decision making just didn't work in the businesses we were moving to, so it became not just a priority but a necessity to compete in the marketplace.
So can we just dive a little bit deeper into the necessity? Because what was really key from this, I mean, the world has changed dramatically. I mean, the world has changed over the last decade. It's changed over 5 years. And even in this year, it's changed. There's people here watching and listening, I think, and their business and their aspect upon the world has completely changed. how did volatility and supply chain issues and uncertainty challenge your traditional planning methods that made you get to this point?
I'll take it on the planning side and let David chime in, but I think the major disruption, and this went for everybody, where it became evident was the COVID period, right? We had a lot of workflows and a lot of processes that were aligned to people sitting in the boardroom together, discussing something, handing it off to somebody else, passing it down the line. In a traditional, in the traditional sense, a lot of the workflows were aligned that way. And it became evident that that was more painful to do digitally. But as we started exploring some of the technologies to move quicker and move faster, it became very evident that it could be a competitive advantage. So I think that is most recent to mind, and something that everybody probably felt, but we felt at great lengths in a lot of our workflows.
Yeah, I would
Absolutely.
add also the experience of the employee. So to ask everyone, have you ever had a time where you've had 4 spreadsheets open on your computer at the same time, and you're trying to cross and make sure the data is tied together because it's going to a CFO or to a senior stakeholder in the business? That was my experience. And really that pain of going through and crossing and making sure the data aligned, and knowing, really having one of the key factors of your success be, do you have the trusted relationship with people who have access to data? And simply being able to ask them in a nice way, hey, can I please get this little bit of data to complete my analysis? A lot of time in meetings, really thinking, going through, reviewing numbers, reviewing decks. That employee experience didn't fit with where we wanted to take IBM as a company, and to this fast, productive way of working where people were really excited to be IBMers and bring that innovation every day. The day-to-day wasn't matching that reality, and that was the pain point, Gary.
Yeah, and totally understand. But even just through that, through COVID, through different pain points, through having so many applications, on top of that, IBM went through a major structural change, mergers, divestitures, a pivot to software. That must have been a complete nightmare just trying to forecast and finance. How did that affect you guys?
You could have. Nightmare is a good description, right? Because when you're bringing in all these acquired companies, they each have different systems, they have different finance flows, different time periods. Normalizing that together, understanding how the data mapped or didn't map, and trying to resolve it or reconcile it or model it, it really created a lot of extra work, and a lot of work, explaining all the nuances through large decks, going through, it also meant that there was a lot of rework. So when something came up and the stakeholders didn't agree with the model, you had to go back and fix things down in multiple sheets and then model it together. And that created a lot of pain for people like Ryan and I. Ryan, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, no, and to add on it, living and breathing that, the word I'd use is uncertainty. There was a lot of uncertainty in those processes because you depended so heavily on the individuals, as David mentioned. And as leaders in different facets of the business, do you trust that individual enough, or do you drive churn to verify, trust but verify? And that was a big factor.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that, because there's people going to be listening here and saying, "Oh my goodness, that we've got to deal with the change that we have in our organization, and this is what I'm going to deal with." But even if you just look at this particular slide before we move on to the flywheel, the very fact that it wasn't just dealing with what IBM, it's all the M&As that you did, and then their different attitudes and their different ways of working. Something obviously had to change, because if it didn't change, it was just going to break. There was just so much going on in there. So that being said, you chose to become client zero.
Yeah.
To transform from within first. What does that mean for the finance organization? Perhaps you can talk us through that now.
Sure. I'll explain this concept of client zero, because it's something that today now for people like Ryan and I, it's become almost the way we work and the way we think and approach things. And this journey really shifted about 5 years ago. And what the focus of Client Zero is to drive productivity to enable growth. And why we call it Client Zero is the idea that IBM is eating our own cooking. We're actually using our own technology, our own capabilities throughout our workflows as a business and working closely with the product teams, sometimes co-developing, like Ryan's team has co-developed with the planning analytics team, certain features and functions. We really work very closely as a team to take the same capabilities we use with the clients and bring them within our operations. What this allows us to do is then create productivity. And so just to share with everyone, we established a mantra within the business that we just repeat over and over again, which is eliminate, simplify, automate to enable productivity. Eliminate, we're a 114-year-old company going through this massive business model shift, all these acquisitions, all this complexity. We really had to question, do we still need to do certain processes? Do we need certain policies? What can we get rid of? And by having that approach, starting with what we can eliminate, it really forced us to question historical practices and ways of working to drive that simplification. Simplicity is all about how can we simplify? And that means everything from, instead of having a 60-page deck, which I used to spend, up till midnight working through the backup charts, can we do it in 2 pages? Can we keep things higher level? Do we not need size 8 font, things on there, and really keep it a higher level? Simplify our approach, simplify our data, simplify our structure, and then apply AI and automation to then automate those processes and make them touchless. And so during this time period, actually over the past 2 years, we've helped support a 30% reduction in our shared services, which for us at our scale is $3.5 billion in a 2-year period, while supporting IBM after years of revenue decline for 4 years of year-over-year revenue growth. And we're actually on a journey now for another 1.8 billion in productivity, which we started in January this year. That productivity is then allowing us to invest in the business. So I mentioned all the, we talked about the M&A, over 50 acquisitions since 2020. We've also increased R&D by 50%. So a lot of it's organic work. And then that new capabilities we create during the investments, we're then applying within our operations as Client Zero. And that's the flywheel effect Gary talked about.
Yeah. Well, I think the key thing here, or one of the key things, I mean, there's some great numbers here, is that, the very fact you have to eliminate before you automate. It's not just about automating everything that you have. In order to get the best out of it, to get the best numbers, you've got to be brave enough to start eliminating and then knowing what to eliminate before you can simplify it, before you can then automate it. And that's one of those key things that people just don't tend to. Less is more, especially when you're looking to automate.
Yeah, and this was a big culture shift for us because we were used to perfection. We were, our manufacturing heritage, absolute perfection. And we had to realize we had to embrace a mantra of progress over perfection, working in iterations, understanding that we were going to have to do things in the multiple ways to then, and also with working in workshops, having design thinking sessions, really understanding the personas and their pain points to give us the data to then drive that elimination, drive that simplification. And we knew we weren't going to be perfect out of the gate, so we had to start and then continue to work through these processes.
Hey guys, if you don't mind, I'm going to chime in real quick. Another poll question, because I think it's right in line with what you were just talking about, like the reiteration and workshops and so forth. So our question that we're launching right now for CPE credits again, when was the last time you redesigned your budget and forecasting models? So I'll leave this open. We'll let the gentleman keep talking because this information is so impactful, but please make sure you go ahead and answer that. David, I'd like to ask you or maybe Ryan, how often do you guys redesign, or is this a continuous flow?
Constantly. And we're constantly reimagining, especially as technology changes. right? More recently, I can tell you two of our major workflows are being rebuilt right now, with what we've learned from some of these things that, the touchless forecasting type of experience, and reanalyzing our workflows and the increased capabilities of what AI is bringing. We're finding new ways to unlock value from technology, and really feed this and invest in other places. So constantly is the answer. In practical terms, we've been redeveloping. New projects are stacked up, lined up, one after another, within our team.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would just say, like, I'm curious. I mean, people on the call, have you ever had a time where you're like close to finishing a project and then you relaunch another one? Somewhat, it's like you're like, oh, here we go again. And we used to have that reaction. Here we go again. Oh gosh, we just finished this big thing, or can we? And it was a big mindset shift. And this flywheel helped us think that we're in continuous productivity mode. We're never done, right? And so once we finished one transformation, like Ryan was just talking about, we're starting another one and continue to go. And so that took for us practice to feel comfortable with that way of working. Just to
Yeah.
show some examples, and underneath this flywheel, by the way, is culture underpins it all. Speed, risk, tolerance, having the right talent is key. So having people who can run these design workshops with you, who really understand how to identify pain points in a persona, who can help you reimagine, that was fundamental for us to achieve these types of outcomes.
So, David, before we move on to that next slide, one final question before we look at these numbers. I love this next slide. It's bold. It's got the results on it, and that's what people are here to do. But how you mentioned perfection, the old legacy of IBM, making sure that everything is absolutely perfect, and you had to change that mindset. How did being your own toughest customer help your team move faster, or even think differently to how this should be approached?
So this was something that I think it took us starting, honestly. Like, it took us starting with very specific workflows and building some proof points, building some momentum. And then then we would tell the story. And that's something that I think if I could go back, we would have spent more time on the storytelling of the success than we did, because the second and third iteration of the workflow transformation would have been easier if we had done more storytelling to the other teams, to the other leaders, highlighted the executives, their experience more. That's something we learned along the way, that we really needed to build that momentum. And then once the momentum starts, once people see that their executive peers have transformed, they want to be part of that process. And it creates that natural pressure in the system. Brian, I don't know if you have a perspective, Dad.
No, I think that well covers it. So I'll let us carry on from that.
Sure. Just to give some examples. So, $3.5 billion is a lot of money, right? It's a lot of savings. This is an annualized number. And here's just some examples. So one, enterprise insights. So one of the biggest pain points we had was what we called the data chase, which was everything Ryan and I talked about: pulling data from multiple systems, manual extracts, normalizing it, curating the data, renormalizing it in spreadsheets, all the data reviews, et cetera. By using this touchless forecasting model, by using data in a more systematic approach and an integrated approach, we've been able to drive significant improvements, right? So $220 million in business value on an annual basis, as well as a 40% FP&A savings and productivity. We've also transformed IBM's support function. So we have over 20,000 support engineers. We've completely digitized their process. And that's helped not only improve the customer experience, which has led to revenue growth, but also significant operational savings for us as well. IT modernization. So one thing Ryan can talk more about, but as we've transformed the workflows, a lot of the legacy systems and applications died a natural death. They just fall off. And what that means, when you turn off that legacy IT, that frees up capital to then reinvest in your transformation initiatives. And then digital labor. So this is really those AI front-end solutions. So instead of people going to other people to answer common questions or to take actions, now they interact with a set of virtual agents that can not only resolve questions that are common, but also execute actions. So for example, instead of having an HR partner support each part of the business, we now have a solution called Ask HR, which is that virtual agent that can do a whole number of activities. Underpinning this are what drives that 3.5 billion is once you deploy, these are just examples, but over 70% of our workflows are embedded with AI. We've been able to then reduce vendor spend because we don't have as many tech providers and vendors as part of our landscape. We've simplified our stack. Indirect roles, we've just not backfilled. So IBM, every year we hire 50,000 people. We've just stopped backfilling for those roles, and that's really driven a lot of productivity benefit for us, including in finance and operations, which are over 40% reduction. This also has meant fewer people, means less real estate. We've optimized our footprint, and then increased the productivity through things like touchless forecasting as well. So this is how we get to those outcomes. Underpinning this transformation, we've had 4 core strategic pillars set by our CFO. Data is absolutely core. It's been core to our touchless forecasting transformation, making sure we think of data governance, data security, integrating data together. The data chase was such a pain point for us in finance that we had to get our data house in order. And finance people like Ryan, myself, we were all big advocates for data governance, including our leadership, because without getting agreement on common data terms, on a common set of data standards, we would continue to have to do that manual work of constantly normalizing the data. And so what we did is we spent a lot of time on data with finance leading the way. Workflow, this was really focused on eliminating handoffs across teams and functions. So how do we think about the operations of the business in a horizontal way, end to end, and eliminate those natural handoffs? So instead of having someone who having one person who was doing this task and optimizing their task, really, and through these workshops that Heather was talking about, we brought diverse teams of people together from different functions, and we worked through the workflow end to end, identifying where can we eliminate pain points across the journey. And I think that was key to bring together those diverse teams, because we started just trying to solve things within our finance, like FP&A squad, and the value wouldn't scale because we kept saying, what about this team? What about HR? What about procurement? What about sales? We needed those cross-functional teams together to drive that productivity. Technology was the automation through the technology capabilities, which we've talked about. And then people was really moving to more agile ways of working. So thinking about the best of agile from IT, we now deploy in finance. So we use agile ceremonies, we do sprint planning, we use Kanban boards where we pull work. And we've also moved away from single threading work to individuals to now we work in squads that can balance work across their team. And it also makes the employee experience much richer and better because people aren't doing the same tasks day in, day out, and can learn new skills in a more flexible way. Underpinning the people side was also a growth mindset. Like I mentioned before, people needed a different mindset that embraced the change for us to get to the productivity we want. And you can see the outcomes of these transformation pillars on the bottom.
So, David,
about the finance, sorry, any questions?
Yeah, how important was it to address? Because most people are looking at it and say, yeah, data is important, workflows are important, the technology is important. But then the last one is people. How important was it to address, maybe we can talk about that, how important it was to address people and culture, not just systems, when it comes to implementing this change?
My perspective is nothing will happen without the people change. Either no outcomes will happen, or else you'll get into vanity technology projects that's what we found, where it's a cool thing that we can show a nice little video of, but it actually didn't change the meat of the work. People are still, still working on slide 57, right, in the backup deck because their CFO wants to be able to answer any question. They're still building the forecast in Excel line by line, right? And so having that people change is essential. And the growth mindset is really important.
Ryan, I remember we talked about it a little bit. What was your thoughts and views on the people here and the importance of people?
I mean, I agree with David. It's absolutely critical. And look, it doesn't matter what organization you're in, throughout history, I think you go look at technological change in history, and there's pushback against the printing press. There's pushback against, you're going to have those human antibodies in any organization where people exist. But for us, where the I'd say where the acceleration really happened is, and it came from leadership. We were really fortunate to have a CFO who came from the technology space, from TNO, and has been a driving force on that journey along the way, who kind of stepped up and laid the gauntlet down, saying, we're going to be best in class. We are going to be best in class. We are going to, because yes, you're going to have the antibodies against technology, but it's inevitable, and it's powerful, and it works, and it becomes competitive advantage. So David's dead on. It's critical, absolutely critical.
Hey guys, before we hop to the next, can I do another quick poll? I'll keep it open while you guys talk. But this polling question is, if you could change one thing about your budgeting and forecasting process, what would it be? So go ahead. There's a bunch of different options there. Remember, guys, if you want CPE credits for your CPA, you need to answer the question. So I'll pass it back to you, Dave.
Sure. And while you guys are answering the question, I'll just talk a little bit about finance in particular. And, when I joined finance and operations, we had just finished something called the Globally Integrated Enterprise. This was really focused on how do we set up global processes? Because IBM, we used to operate like a bunch of we used to be almost like a holding company, with each geography and market operating very independently. So IBM Mexico was different from IBM France, different from IBM Germany, different from the US, et cetera. And what we had to do was standardize our finance processes at the global level. We also, during this period, really focused on taking advantage of our strategic locations. So these were centers that we set up where we could concentrate finance skills. Actually, Ryan is based in one, right? Rochester, Minnesota was one of our first centers, and bring that concentration of talent together to drive productivity. What we've realized pretty significant value from this. This was over a 10-year journey. We had a 50% reduction in the cost of finance. So it's significant. However, we did a benchmark. Our CFO is a big believer in looking outside in. This is where some of the capabilities, that Heather talked about is key. Like when you start to look not just inward, but outward at best practices, we thought we were really great. And what we found is, in the high growth software space, as part of our business model transformation, we were actually in the fourth quartile. And it was a big eye-opening experience for us. And we had to fundamentally change the way we worked to compete effectively as a finance organization with that speed Ryan mentioned. And that's really where we focused on data workflow tech and people, what I went through just now. Data standards was core. One thing that we set out was, how do we integrate our data? So how do we take data from all the different systems that finance needs to execute their workflows, whether it's HR or sales or procurement or, all the core financial elements, the financial planning? How do we bring it together in a way so it's really easy for financial professionals to access and deliver a self-serve user experience? And then with integrated data, how can we then cut across those silos that exist in the functional areas to deliver horizontal workflow transformation, eliminate those handoffs? And then I mentioned the agile ways of working. One other component of it within finance was a big focus on digital skills. So we used to live, eat, and breathe Excel, right? That's where we spent our days and nights. And now it's not the core day-to-day tool we use anymore. We've upskilled our teams to be much more focused on creating digital experiences for self-service, like dashboards and reports, and also training AI agents to deliver insights to their stakeholders, as well as using planning analytics as that engine for modeling, for FP&A work, et cetera. Where we are today is all about AI, the AI-driven enterprise, working what we have a term our CEO came up with called working on the glass. What this means is no PowerPoints allowed in meetings, no spreadsheets allowed in the reviews. People go to digital experiences and consume insights in a self-service way. Touchless forecasting, so we don't build ground-up forecasts anymore. It's now automated through AI. And then that eliminates, simplify, automate is how we're continuing to drive productivity. Any questions, Gary, from your perspective on the finance journey?
Yeah, I mean, this journey is quite a roadmap, and so could you perhaps help us understand how did you prioritize where to start across all of these areas? Because I know you've laid it out quite nicely. How did you decide where to start? Was it data, tech, people, process? What was your thought process when creating this particular transformation journey?
I think from our perspective, we couldn't just do one at a time, frankly, because we would have moved way too slow with the transformation. We had to do it in an iterative way where we would look at the workflow. And I think workflow is a good place to start because you're thinking, how does our work get done? How can we optimize it? And then what data underpins the steps of the workflow that we need to drive normalization and standardization against? And then how do we change the way of working within that workflow? And so what really those sessions, those in-person working sessions, and I think we would have moved a lot faster. Ryan mentioned COVID. COVID was really hard for us because, for example, today we're pretty much every week we run workshops where we're bringing people together physically to work through these pain points and drive this. During COVID, we couldn't do that. So we had to figure out how can we do this in a digital way that's highly engaging. And it slowed us down a little bit, but we got pretty good at doing it through a digital means and really unpacking all the components of the workflow. So that was our approach, Gary.
Gotcha. So as we move on to, you mentioned earlier the data chase. Perhaps you could talk us through now, what exactly you meant by that and how things have changed now.
Yeah,
on the next slide.
Data chase was really simple. It was like we used to spend a lot of time pulling data from different systems and normalizing it, or normalizing across different time periods when data would be refreshed from different systems. We used to have debates even at the C level over who had the right numbers. And we spent a lot of time in reviews with management and leaders, double checking, triple checking the numbers were right. So you didn't have a terrible moment in front of the CFO of the company that the number you said didn't match another number and it caused confusion and then no one could make a decision. So that was the data chase. Today, we focus on data integration to end the data chase. What this means, and the way I'm going to talk to this chart is that data really starts on the left and flows left to right. And so we have a number of different source systems, over 50 systems, but the big systems we run the company, marketing, sales, support, AR, AP systems, supply chain, HR, all that, as well as all the planning and analytics environments where we do our multidimensional planning. We integrate that data together in one common enterprise data model that aligns to those enterprise data standards. And then we distribute the insights through a consumption data mart. And then that's what drives that consumption experience with rich visualization so people can self-serve. They can work on the glass, whether it's through a dashboard or through an AI agent they're interacting with. One thing, while the data in this chart flows left to right, one thing to clarify is the transformation flows right to left. So you actually start with what's the decision, what's the workflow you're trying to transform in that blue box at the bottom. And then you work backwards, what calculations will support it, what data elements need to be integrated to drive that. And then that helps you prioritize what data points you need to bring together and integrate. And so I just want to make people clear that this is a tech diagram that shows a data flow, but it also is the transformation helps define the requirements and prioritization as part of that.
I'd certainly believe in reverse engineering. The result first. Once you actually know where you want to be, the destination, then you can reverse engineer it. Because one of the things that would be very important is that you can't do from left to right, but you can only do from right to left, is actually to know what type of questions to ask to get the right answers. Correct?
Exactly. one other thing about this integrated data, it's not only ending the data chase, driving productivity, making the experience much better for people in finance. It also is core to our AI journey. So just to share a little bit more about what we're doing in AI across finance, but we use that trusted integrated data to drive everything, whether it's accounting insights into our contracts or automating our journal process, our intercompany journals, et cetera. Whether it's our treasury management. So we've optimized our treasury because of this integrated data and using planning analytics as the engine for modeling for treasury operations. All the financial reporting is touchless. All the FP&A is touchless through touchless forecasting. And then those analytics that decision support to the business. So for example, we used to spend 1,100 hours a month preparing for a C-suite review. 1,100 man hours preparing for one C-suite data review. Now we spend only about 10 hours preparing for that meeting, and it's all about actions and what recommendations based on qualitative research. We've automated all that process that used to go into simply arming our C-level suite leaders with operational data. Ryan, I don't know if you want to talk more about the AI piece from your perspective.
Yeah, I think the integration or the data integration story is critical to that, right? When you talk about data and applications in silos and lack of governance and things like that, the AI just doesn't scale, right? If you require human glue to explain the difference between system A and system B, imagine what an AI agent, what you have to do to train that AI agent on something as mundane as that, right? And so to get that scale, to get that, you really need it to come together in a governed, aligned and integrated way. So that's pretty critical. I think also, what's interesting about this entire journey is part of this journey is the power of that data integration story as a standalone value stream, because you look at living in that journey, the handoffs, the of the workflow, the sitting in the boardroom passing off data, the amount of churn that can come from a simple question in the C-suite, right? So living digitally today on our EPM platform, an executive can ask a question, you can drill in. It doesn't lead to follow-up calls with very expensive people. It doesn't lead to unwanted churn where maybe they ask the question in a loose way and it gets passed down through team after team after team and spreads globally just to answer a simple question, right? The democratization of data is like we like to call it. It's there. It's at your fingertips, and you're spending more time on action.
How many of you? I'm sure for those on the call, how many of you are experimenting with AI? And we feel like there's so much experimentation, but Ryan mentioned scale and the ability to actually embed and trust the AI in the workflow, and having that data foundation, having that workflow transformation is really what we've found to be core to go from that experimental phase to something we can really rely on as core to our workflow and drive these types of outcomes. Because if I go back 2 years, we were doing a lot of the experimentation, right? The ChatGPT moment, a lot of experimentation with Gen AI, but it took this really thoughtful approach to making it real within the business flow. And I just wanted to share that with everyone because, the technology is there, but if it's not embedded within a broader process change and workflow change, we found, and data change, the value is minimal. I wanted to show a quick demo just so you guys can see some of this.
While you prompt that, David, you guys put me in chat, so we just get a visual of how many of you are experimenting with AI today, and put not yet if you're planning to, but haven't gotten there yet. Let's just get a vibe while he pulls up this demo.
And David, I have one question for you, or either one of you, Ryan or David. You mentioned it earlier there, is trusting the data when you're using AI. And that's a key word. And many of the people here be thinking, yeah, I can see the process, I can see the understanding of it, I can see the great results you guys have got, but my issue is on the trust. How can we address that sort of fear that people will have about trusting the data from AI? And how have you guys gone about it?
It's a great one, and I'll show something after this demo that it's a big issue, right? Because it's a massive workflow change to going from trusting a human being that's living to trusting an agent to deliver insight. I think you've got to iterate, you've got to start, you got to experiment, and then prove, and then over time, people will say, "Oh wait, yeah, this all makes sense. This ties." And I think that that's the only way that we found. And I think we've had a few experiences in the past before Gen AI, kind of in the ML focused era of AI, where we tried big bangs. We're just gonna roll this out and it just didn't. No one trusted it. No one used it. They've defaulted to the old way of working. What we've really learned is through the iteration and the proof of value, you build that trust.
Yeah, and I think stepping back to how you find those places where you can trust, it goes back to really understanding your workflow, being very introspective of your workflow, and finding where the value add is, right? A workflow that includes a human or a technology, they're adding value along the way, especially in the planning process, right? A planner is there not to just, we talked about gathering data, assembling data, all of that. You push that off to the side and down the value chain. Now what is their role and what value do they add? They add insight, they add, analysis, and they add action. So kind of unpacking where the value is added and where AI can play in those different spaces is very, very important, because some will work better than other in current state of technology. If you have a super complex data set and complex process that, like I just mentioned, that even your best subject matter expert can't explain very easily, the odds AI is going to step in, and also the mindset of augmenting your workflows with AI, right? There's one of my favorite thought leaders out there talking about AI said, you're not going to get replaced by AI. You're going to get replaced by a person who uses AI effectively, right? And has a productivity of 10. And I think that's very true. So it's taking that mindset that it's not going to be the all-knowing perfect agent that everybody's envisioned in the movies, but really breaking down where humans and where technology add value, and experimenting and seeing where it works, because it absolutely does in certain spaces and less so in others.
And Brian, I want to leave time to show the
IBM
demo.
Planning Analytics has the built-in.
So just to give you some context, this is actually a recorded video from our friend and colleague, Bill, who many of you may know. But this is really just showing an illustration of the power of AI forecasting and planning analytics, and models, essentially shows what we use internally as IBM for our touchless forecasting. So let me share.
Forecasting for all of your business needs. On the screen, we have the ability right here to look at my 5G product line. I can select either the individual SKUs at the lowest level, or I can take any of the parent roll-up consolidations. It is your choice. But as soon as I select the items that I want to forecast, you now have the forecast capability showing up. So if you are looking for just time series exponential smoothing model that looks at trends, seasonality of your history, and uses that to project forward, that is our univariate forecasting capability. So here I'm able to select my starting period, my ending period. I can auto detect the seasonality. I can also have it adjust for outliers if I wanted to. And I have the choice of how much data I want to use for my forecast. I can use all of the history in my cube, or just what I have brought into the view here on the screen. For the univariate forecasting or exponential smoothing model, when I look at the preview, it is going to give me some statistical details here that tells me what are the measures in the fit of the model. It tells me the 9 different algorithms that have run, as well as which one it chose as the right fit. It is giving me an accuracy score based off of the trend and seasonality strength. All of this gives me the ability to look at that as a time series forecast and use that to project forward. My second option is to bring in external factors, and that's the multivariable forecast. Again, it knows the time frame that I'm looking for. I can select which external factors are impacting my future forecast. So it's going to make the correlation, in this case, of consumer spending and unemployment on my sales history and use that to project forward, knowing what the future consumer spending and unemployment rates are. So when I look at that preview, it's not giving me a great picture here, and I can look at it based off of the different products that I selected. I can look at the statistical details. Now, I notice that while consumer spending and unemployment both are contributing factors to my forecast, consumer spending really is not a big driver of this. So I want to change from using consumer spending and unemployment to a different external factor. So in this case, I'm going to choose inflation. So now my external factor is inflation and unemployment. Now I could see that what was a low forecast is now high. So clearly a better correlation of my two external factors to change my forecast to predictive accuracy of low to predictive accuracy of high. I want to forecast those numbers and have it put into my environment. It's now calculating it. It's entering the data into my database. It's also updating my charts. So that is the built-in AI forecasting capability within planning analytics.
And this is this is an example that Bill put together, but we thought it'd be helpful to show as how we're using within IBM planning analytics. And just to double click on this, and I just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this fairly net. I wanted to show, this is another example of our dummy environment. So this is where a financial planning professional would come into planning analytics, and they would look while they're doing their, let's say, budget review process. They would see the actuals, but they also see those modeled outputs from the touchless forecasting from those capabilities embedded within their planning analytics environment. We've also created this explainability dashboard so we can actually track the performance of the models and see how is the model performing over time by unit, what's the method and motivation that we're using. And so as Bill went through that set of factors we're bringing into the analysis, we actually track that in a systematized way. So we can always evaluate which variables are having the best impact on the performance, what other things do we need to bring in, like he used inflation as an example, to help us get the most accurate forecast as part of the model. And one thing just to share, again, in our PA environment, we allow the financial planning professional, we call them assessments, but you could say adjustments. They can make adjustments to the forecast based on data that the system wouldn't know. For example, a major acquisition that impacts a certain market, or some sort of seasonality effect that's unplanned, or something like that. In this time of uncertainty, having that human in the loop process helps build that trust in the system, like Ryan was saying, helps correct for information that AI doesn't know. We do set very high clip levels, so you can't go in and make the correction or assessment on something that's $2,000, right? It has to be material to the impact of the forecast for us to drive that productivity benefit. So let me stop there on the demo. Sorry, one last thing to show, and I'm just going to flash this, but we're also creating an AI solution that answers questions about this process for people in the business. So we have sample question types, we have examples, and so people can come and self-serve if they want to understand more about how does the touchless forecasting work, what are some types of ways it drives value. We've created an assistant to do that, so people aren't going to the finance team to ask questions about the AI. We're using AI to answer those questions. Let me pause there. Gary, any questions based on this?
There's a hand raise. So Allie, if you could please put your question in chat. That way, since we are on a webinar, I don't believe we have the ability to unmute you. So if you could please put it in chat, we'll make sure we address it. And that being said, I'm going to launch the fourth polling question. Look at me sliding that in there. So I'll launch this and keep this open while you guys go through this next slide. This next question is, how well are your strategic goals of the organization communicated to everyone?
This is something I think has been a really big change at IBM. I think in the past, we under communicated, right? Things would kind of sit at the high levels and people at the high level would be aligned, but it really got lost in the translation. And you had middle management, for example, who would say, Yeah, we don't really need to do that. That's just a phase, that's just a fad. Um, and we've gotten really focused, and I think our CFO, Ryan, I don't know your perspective, I think he models this really well at over communicating. And we have, for example, two annual training days. One is focused on AI. We call it the AI Challenge. Another is focused on skill building. We call it Future Me. So we have 2 full days on that, and then we're pretty much monthly publishing blog posts, publishing updates. We do videos to communicate this focus. At once a year, our CFO will do a major site visit where he's done a few with, dance performances and videos. Like, they make it fun to really communicate that strategic value in a consistent way. So now if someone says the term client zero, it's not a surprise to anyone. Hope that was helpful, Heather, in that answer.
Yes, it definitely was. I love the video idea. I don't think anybody would want to see me dancing.
So just in the interest of time, I'm going to cover just super quickly. This is just quickly before and after, right? So our data was a mess, the data chase. Now we have a single trusted source. PA is one of the core engines of our trusted data platform. Workflow focused on end-to-end outcomes, driven by diverse teams coming together to resolve bottlenecks and solve issues. Tech, everything is AI driven, digital driven, away from spreadsheets and manual tools. Agile, so from single threaded tasks to squads working together in a cohesive way. And then skills, right? Really upskilling our finance team because they're doing less of the data work, telling the news of the business, to be business advisors, to really be those strategic advisors for their business leaders in driving the business forward. From a lessons learned perspective, we just have 4. So one is empower teams to do this. The real magic happens when we bring teams together bottom up to come up with the innovation. Invest in that workflow analysis. Understand how work gets done today. What's the future? Think deeply about the user experience and to make it consumable. And then prioritizing that change management, the over communication, the behaviors, the modeling, examples. These are our 4 kind of key strategic lessons learned. Heather or Gary, any questions about these?
I think not regard to any questions. I think again, it's as you said, these are the 4 lessons. If people are looking to get started, they understand where they need to be. I think these are a really good initial 4 blocks that they could be looking into.
I want to add one comment though on the invest in the workflow analysis. And you said something earlier, David. You mentioned that the skills of finance are changing from what I went to school for, to geek out on numbers, right? And now it's almost like we have to become a butterfly and morph into this communicator, this advisor, somebody that can ask the deep questions, facilitate these conversations. And for many of us, that's a learning curve. But I can tell you from personal experience, people, it can be learned. It is like a muscle that we have to practice. And obviously, these gentlemen are great at it. But whatever you can do, start leveling up your communication skills to ask those questions and ask the probing questions, not the surface ones, right?
Yeah, just the last comment at time. The best time to start your journey was last year. The second best time is today. And I just can't emphasize, just get started, just try, iterate, have the workshop, and then over time you'll build that momentum to drive major outcomes and value.
Yeah, and I think another point to that is when you just got to get started. The first thing that, and I have surveyed CFOs, I present at FEI conferences, and I always ask, how many of you can clearly articulate the strategic goals of the company? And I'm always shocked. Bill and I actually did this at an FEI event about 2 years ago, and like less than 4% of the CFOs in the room raised their hand. So shocking, but true. So if you want to start anywhere, just take that first action, that first step. Go find out what today are clearly the strategic goals of the company, because that's going to empower you to start asking the right questions. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because then you can align everything to those goals.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So first off, I want to thank all of you gentlemen. I've been like I'm geeking out taking notes, and I've already heard this presentation. So this was really impactful. Hopefully other people got it. Guys, we always like to do a thing just to get a little feedback. If you could, in chat right now, put 0 to 10. How was this presentation for you? 10 is extraordinary. 0, you probably lost a family member today. So please go ahead, put it in chat. What did you get out of this today? What's your score? I'm gonna go with a 9.5 because I always like to hope that we could get even better. Wow, we're getting some 10s with exclamation points. This is fabulous. So thank you guys. Any last final parting words before we sign off? David?
It's a privilege to get the chance to share our story. Thank you for the time.
Ryan?
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. It's been a pleasure discussing this topic that we're both very passionate about.
Great. And Gary?
Thank you, gentlemen, for your insights today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you guys.
So for everyone on this webinar, we will send a follow-up email. Some of you came into this webinar through another partner. We have a whole network of partners worldwide. And to those of you that are partners with us worldwide, thank you. If you came in through those partners will be following up with you. And so if you have any questions, you can always ask us as well. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you on our next webinar. Thanks, guys.